Okay, so welcome back, everybody. We've missed 4 weeks, essentially. Even though I was only away for 2 weeks, we've missed 4 weeks. So what I want to do is a quick recap, very quick recap, of the beginning of Sefer Devorim, the book of Deuteronomy, as they call it in English/Greek. It's a Greek word. And then just go through this week's Parsha, essentially. And then hopefully we'll speak just a little bit about our experience in Israel, which in itself was a miracle that we got there. But we'll come back to that, please God, later on. Okay, so Sefer Devorim, the book of Devorim, the rabbis call it Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah meaning a explanation or repetition of the Torah. Because essentially the book starts from, and right at the beginning of Devorim, it tells us that it's where Moshe Rabbeinu was. These are the words of Moshe, where he was standing on the first day of the 11th month. 11th month, Jewish month being Cheshvan. The 12th month being Adar. And we know Moshe Rabbeinu died on the 7th of Adar. So we've essentially got 5 weeks. The book of Devarim is the last 5 weeks of Moshe's life. And it's his speech that he did over those 5 weeks to the Jewish people, his parting speech to everybody. This is what Moshe left us with. It contains somewhere around 200 mitzvahs, many of whom, or most of them are a repetition of what we've learned before, but there are many new mitzvahs that Moshe introduces to the Jewish people. And what we know from Chazal, from the rabbis, is nothing was new. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't make up anything in the book of Devarim. It was all given to him on Mount Sinai in the first few months that they were at Mount Sinai. Moshe received all of the Torah. It was just transmitted to the Jewish people because most of the book of Devarim is around what are you going to do when you get to Israel? How is life in the land of Israel? We're now leaving the desert. So it doesn't focus on anything in the desert. It focuses on what happened. There's a lot of history in it in terms of things like the golden calf and things like Moshe was on Mount Sinai, came down, things like the spies. All the stories that happened, many of them are repeated. But the essential focus of Devarim is what is going to happen when you get to Israel. How are you going to live in the land of Israel? And we see that coming through in each of the parshas in a slightly different way, different focus as we go through Sefer Devorim, the book of Devarim. The difference between Devarim and the other 4 books is the other 4 books are Daber Hashem el Moshe Lemor, essentially. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Hashem's telling Moshe, this is what you have to tell the Jewish people. In this book, Moshe is saying, Hashem told me to say this. It's Moshe's speech, that Hashem told him what to say, but it's essentially Moshe speaking and giving the message directly to the Jewish people as opposed to being a conduit, the messenger of Hashem. Here he is the primary source of the information, not the source, but it's his words, so to speak, although it is true Torah from Hashem completely. So the beginning of Devarim is all about Moshe rebuking the Jewish people. Watch what you do. Do the right thing, essentially. It's about appointment of judges. He then discusses the spies. Why did we have to spend 40 years in the desert? Because the spies came back with a bad report. Yeshua and Kalev were positive. The other 10 spies were not. We were punished for 40 years. We had to be in the desert. That day that it all happened was the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av. And for the first time ever, I experienced Tisha B'Av in Yerushalayim at the Kotel. An incredible experience. But please God, we'll come back to that if we have time to discuss our trip. Okay, he discusses the battles that we'd been through just previously with Esav, with Moab. Then Hashem says, right, now it's time to go. We need to get to the land of Israel and the battle that they had, they had a conquest of Og and Sichon, and then the discussion that we had previously about Reuven and Gad wanting to keep land on the other side of the Jordan, not going into Israel, and Moshe agreeing eventually and then saying, fine, you can have that land, but we're going to put part of Manasseh with you as well to keep continuity and connection between the tribes in Israel proper and those over Yarden, over the border. That is essentially Parshas Devorim. Parshas Ve'eschanan, Moshe davens. And we learn from the word Ve'eschanan that Moshe davened 515 times. The numerical value of the word Ve'eschanan is 515, if you add up all the letters, to be able to allow to go into the land of Israel. Hashem said no. Beautiful Divrei Torah from those first few verses. Moshe was not allowed to go in. The reason given is that he struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. That's probably the straw that broke the camel's back. That was the final thing. There were several other reasons why Moshe couldn't go in. Hashem didn't want Aaron and Moshe in. We needed different leaders to come in. If Moshe had gone in and led the Jewish people into Israel, essentially Mashiach would have been here. We wouldn't have had to go through all the trials and tribulations. The world would have been a very, very different place. Okay, he discusses all the different things that happened, discusses the future, the fact that we are going to be exiled, that we will return to Israel, that Mashiach eventually will come. It's not written directly in the Torah, it's alluded to. But certainly that we will have exiles and we will come back is written directly there. Okay, then he talks about the cities of refuge. We've spoken about them before. Moshe Rabbeinu himself wanted to set aside 3 cities of refuge over the Jordan. Yeshua set aside the other 3 inside Israel. We had 3 on each side of the Jordan River, almost parallel with each other. Cities of refuge are designed for people who inadvertently kill somebody to have refuge so that the relatives of the murdered person can't come and kill them. We've got a whole chapter in the Gemara in Makkas just discussing that. Moshe sets them aside. And then we have a repetition of the 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments were brought early on in Parshas Yisro. Moshe repeats them again with a number of differences. There's slight differences in the wording. The main difference is in the way that Shabbos is introduced. In Parshas Yisro, the first time the 10 Commandments are listed, it says Zachor es Yom HaShabbos. Here it says Shamor. There it says remember. Here it says protect, safeguard, watch over. The positive and the negative mitzvahs. It's brought down that both the first set of tablets that Hashem gave to Moshe, which Moshe smashed when he came down with the golden calf, Moshe was then told to carve out a second set and take them back up again in Mount Sinai. Hashem wrote on the second one. It's brought down that on both sets it said Zachor, not Shamor. Moshe brings Shamor here. Hashem said Zachor and Shamor simultaneously. The Jewish people heard Zachor. Moshe heard Shamor because it's the positive side of things. Moshe, if we can hear, and that's learning of the Sefer of the chief rabbi about Shabbos, is looking at that positive side, the way we can get to where we want to be. They say this Shabbos is Shabbos Mevorchim Chodesh Elul. Chodesh Elul is next week, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday we start playing shofar. In other words, it's 5 weeks from Rosh Hashanah. Wow. In pre-war Europe, there's stories of shuls where as soon as the chazan gets up on the Shabbos and says Rosh Chodesh El, people heard the word El and they fainted. There were stories of women up in the women's gallery fainting because Elul's coming. It's like we need to connect to Hashem. Now's the time. Elul's about connection. And the connection is that there's 2 ways to connect to Hashem. One is out of yira. They translate it as fear, but it's probably always a better word, awe of Hashem. But it's fear of doing the wrong thing. It's if I don't do the mitzvahs, then what are the consequences? And the second way is love. Love is at a much higher level. And that's a Zachor and Shamor in a similar way. If we can reach that higher level, that's our goal. To reach that, I'm serving Hashem, I'm doing mitzvahs because I'm in love with Hashem. I'm in love with the mitzvahs that He gave me. Not because I'm scared of the consequences. That's a lower level. The higher level is love of Hashem. Okay, so that's the Aseret HaDibros, the 10 statements. And then we come to the Shema. And the Torah mentions the verse of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad and the first chapter of Va'ahavta, love Hashem. So that's the love part of it. We'll come back to the second paragraph in a moment. But the words Shema and Echad, the first and last word of the statement of Shema, have got a big ayin and a big daled. Ayin daled is an aid, witness. We are witnesses That when we say the Shema, we're accepting upon ourselves that Hashem is our God, and Hashem is the one and only God. The word Shema itself has lots of different meanings. Somebody mentioned that in the one, I can't remember which Siddur it was, but there's, I think it's one of the Koran Siddurim. It brings 7 different explanations of what we understand from Shema. I always think of 3. Shema means to hear. Yeah. Shema means to listen. Yeah. Hearing and listening are very different things. Mm-hmm. But Shema also means to accept. So when we say the Shema, we say, I hear, I'm listening. The way I say the Shema Yisrael, listen, Jew boy, talking to myself, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem's our God. One day, when Mashiach comes, when the world realizes, Hashem will be Echad, Hashem will be unified. Everybody will realize when Mashiach comes that Hashem is the one and only God. Echad doesn't mean one, it means one and only. It's uniqueness of Hashem. Then we say Vahafta, which is loving Hashem, and we concentrate on loving Hashem. Okay, the rest of Parshas Re'eh essentially is about not succumbing to prosperity as it's brought in Art Scroll. We are going to get rich. We're going to grow. We need to know that it's not from us. And this brought out in last week's Parsha, in Akev. But Hashem gives us everything we need. He puts us in a position. The world has never been in a position like it's been over the last few decades. The prosperity in the Western world, yes, there is poverty in many, many places, but the prosperity in the Western world, the way the Jews mostly have been able to live, has been unheard of since any time, probably since way back when in King Solomon's time. And we need to know that it all comes from Hashem. It's not that I did it for myself. Frank Sinatra did it his way, we do it Hashem's way. We need to trust in Hashem. Okay, and then finally, towards the end of Eschanan, it talks about teaching the traditions to children. We need to know how to teach our children, to keep things going, because Torah is an oral transmission, even though it's written down, the oral law is written down in the Mishnah, in the Gemara, and in many other works. We need to know that we need to teach parent to child, one generation to the next, what happened, where we were, how we got there. Okay, that ends by Eschanan, last week's Parsha, Akev, and Akev is a heel. Be careful of those mitzvahs that you trample on. What we see as light, easy mitzvahs that you just trample on, be careful of those. The little things, the small things in life, be very, very careful of those small things. We are assured by Hashem that we will get a reward, that things will work out for us in the end. Just hang in there. Just hang tight. Make sure we're there. The Torah talks about food and the lesson of the man. Hashem gave us man in the desert for 40 years. He fed us. We didn't have to worry about food. The Torah says our clothing, it got dirty. You just put in the clouds and you took it out. It was clean. You put on a little bit of weight. You put in the clouds. You took it out. It was fixed. It grew with you. You lost some weight. You went on a diet. You didn't need to lose and put on weight because man was spiritual food. There was no wastage in man. Whatever you ate was absorbed perfectly by the body. But whatever happened with our clothing, it got damaged. The clouds repaired it. We didn't have to worry. Everything was there for us on a platter. We didn't have to work. All we did was sat and learn Torah. When Hashem said move, we moved. And over the 40 years, we moved around a bit. But as we learned previously, we didn't move around that much. We were in one place for 19 years in that 40-year period. The blessing of the land of Israel, the fruits of the land of Israel are brought out. Israel is the land of wheat, barley, grape, fig, pomegranate, a land of olives and date honey. Those are the species that Israel is blessed with. And today we see these things growing in Eretz Israel. Okay, the mitzvah of doing Birkat Hamazon, benching, is brought in the Sig Pasha. It says, "V'achalta v'savatu u'yorachta es Hashem Elokecha al haaretz ha'toiva asher nasan lach." For the land, you will eat and you'll be satisfied, and then you bless Hashem for the good land that He gives you. We need to remember that Hashem gives us everything, even though we need to work. And Adam HaRishon was told that by the sweat of his brow he's got to work, and Noach was told he's got to go and work, and therefore mankind till today has to work. We need to know we need to put in our effort, and Hashem does the rest. We still eat man today. And if we just took a step back and realized that everything comes from Hashem, we just need to look at our own lives. And I'll just give you one simple example. I know that we ate man in this house. Not in this house. We do in this house as well, but previously. When my kids were in school, I used to take, here's our salary. This is what we're earning every month. There's the mortgage. There's the school fees. There's a little bit of this tzedakah we took off before that. And now there's a negative number because take the school fees and take the mortgage and a little bit of food, and the numbers don't add up, but we never didn't pay any bills because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us what we need. And every one of us can work that out. At various points in our lives, if you just take a step back, you can look, you can realize that Hashem gives us everything that we want. Okay, the Parsha goes on, talks about remembering the Exodus. We need to remember everything we do. As we're about to go into Israel, there was this thing called the Exodus. Hashem did take us out of Egypt. Hashem did go through, give us the plagues to see that He is in control of everything. Moshe gives a little bit of a history of the world. He talks about that there were a temporary ark was made. He had smashed the tablets, and he needed to carve out new tablets, take it up to Hashem, and Hashem inscribed the words of Sefer Devorim again. He discusses that Aaron had passed away just a few months before that. Talks about the Levim, and talks about that Hashem reconciles it all. Hashem brings it all together. And know that the miracles of Hashem, you experience them in the desert day by day. You're going into the land of Israel. You might not see those same miracles of the man, of the water, of those kind of things, but know that Hashem is always there performing these incredible miracles for us. It talks about the land of Israel, and then the second paragraph of the Shema. And when we're saying the second paragraph of the Shema, V'haya im shamoya, we need to focus on, there's mitzvahs, there's reward and punishment. And there's positive and negative mitzvahs, and if we don't do the right thing, we will be punished. Because the focus on the second paragraph of Shema is, if you do the mitzvahs, if you do the right thing, then the rain will fall at the right time. And the grass will provide food for your cattle, and you're going to eat, and you're going to be satisfied. That's, the two paragraphs of Shema. The first one is the love, this one's the yira, the fear, the awe of Hashem. Okay, if observe the mitzvahs that Hashem commands us, to love Hashem your God, walk in His ways and cleave to Him, which is a theme, that verse towards the end of the Parsha is a theme through all of these Parshas. It's brought out beautifully by the Chofetz Chaim in Avas Chesed, in the Sefer Loving Kindness. In the introduction, it's got a footnote there on how it connects. This verse in various different forms is mentioned different times through these Parshas. And it's brought out beautifully how we can connect. Our goal needs to be to love Hashem. How do we love Hashem? Well, we walk in His ways. What is walking in Hashem's ways? What Hashem does. What does Hashem do? Well, He visits the sick. We've got history of that. Hashem came to visit Abraham. So what do we need to do? Emulate Hashem, visit the sick. He comforts the mourners. What do? We've got to comfort mourners. And everything that Hashem does, be kind to Hashem is kind to us. We need to be kind to other people. But do those things. Anybody can visit the sick. Not only Jewish people. But do it. I'm going to visit the sick. Do it in a way that Hashem wants me to do it. Say Tehillim, wish the person a refuah shlema, offer them help, whatever it might be. And then we are doing exactly what Hashem does. We're emulating what Hashem does. Okay, so we get to this week's Parsha. Parshas Re'eh. Re'eh is to see. See what Hashem, or Moshe says, what I put before you today. What is Moshe putting before the Jewish people today? Bracha and klala, blessing and a curse. What's the blessing? What is the blessing that Moshe is going to put before the Jewish people? Es habracha asher tishmu el mitzvos Hashem elokechem asher anochi mitzvah eschem hayom. If you hearken to the mitzvahs of Hashem that I command you today, that's the blessing. The blessing is Not that Hashem's going to give you $1 million or $100 million or $700 million, I think I saw is available now. No, not here, overseas. We can book it here as well, though. You can buy a ticket in Australia for the US one for 778 million Aussies if you want it. It's taxable in the US, but so be it. That's not what it's talking about. If you do the mitzvahs, that is a blessing. And the next verse is, and if you don't do the mitzvahs of Hashem your God, you stray from them, as I command you today. What is that? Following gods of others. That's the curse. Quite simple. There obviously are consequences. Like we learned in last week's Parsha in second paragraph of Shema, if you do the blessed mitzvahs, then guess what? Hashem will give you whatever you need. If you don't, he won't. Quite simple. Now, does he give people what they don't deserve? Yeah, absolutely. And does it appear that some people struggle and suffer when they're doing the mitzvahs? Yes, absolutely. That's Hashem's calculation for things. That's Moshe Rabbeinu's question. Moshe asked the question, why do the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper? Hashem says one day we'll figure it out because there's reason for everything. One of the reasons given is you see somebody who's pretty wicked, the ultimate gangster. And this gangster's driving around in a fancy Lamborghini and he's got a multi-million-dollar home and he's got all the jewelry and whatever else. But he is the cruelest, most horrible person in the world. Chances are he probably did something good. Hashem's rewarding him in this world for the good because in the next world, he's going to cop it.
No problem.
And similarly, no human being is 100% righteous. Everybody does sin. Everybody does something wrong at whatever level. And so therefore, a righteous person who seems to suffer in this world is going through a process so that he can get, I'm saying he, but he, she, in the next world will get full reward and gets a little bit of suffering in this world rather than having to go through suffering in the next world. It's one of the answers given. Okay, we need to remember the land of Israel is sanctified. It is a land that has an elevation beyond any other land. And whenever we have sanctity, we have negativity. We have both. And so there's a complete draw, a Yetzer Hara, to pull us to the negative. So yes, you feel, you can palpably feel the holiness of the land of Israel. It's incredible, but at the same time, there is often this pull against us because the whole world needs to be in balance. It needs to be, because we don't have Mashiach, because we need to struggle through life. Life is not supposed to be, what they call it, bed of roses, a bowl of cherries. There needs to be some form of struggle because we need to grow. We're not going to grow if we're just sitting back happily enjoying life. We need to go through things that are hard to get us there. And so therefore there's always that pull to the negative. Wherever there's extreme sanctity, there needs to be that opposite pull so that we can choose the right direction. Okay. The Torah discusses when you get to the land of Israel, get rid of all the idolatry there, get rid of all that negativity, make sure that things can be as pure as possible. And that's a beautiful message coming to Elul, where in our own lives, we need to think, what are those things that drag us? What are those things that drag us back, that keep pulling us away from spirituality? Get rid of them. Just, delete the app on your phone that you have to play games all the time. I don't know what it might be, whatever. I'm talking about whatever, that thing that drags you away all the time. Just delete it. Just say, Hashem, you know what, for 1 month, leading up to Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to delete that one thing that wastes so much of my time. And just for the 10% of that time, I'm making this up now, that I waste on that, let me spend thinking about Hashem or reading a book about Hashem or doing something, going to visit a friend who's a little bit down, whatever the case might be. Just whatever. That's a huge topic, but absolutely, just focus on one small thing. People have to-do lists. Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss, who's in New Jersey now, used to be in Staten Island. He had a thing that I've heard a few times from him. Comes Elul, or comes towards Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, don't make a to-do list. Make a to-do better list. Write down on a piece of paper in the front of your Rosh Hashanah, your Yom Kippur Machzor is a good place. Write down those 2, 3, 4, not 20 things, 2, 3, 4 small, tiny things that each of us knows that we can do better in life. Whatever it is, between me and myself, between myself and friends, other people, between myself and Hashem. Maybe 3 things, one in each category. How can I do better there? And that's my focus. Go to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and say, Hashem, this is where I want to focus my life on. I want to do better in one tiny little thing in each of those 3 areas. Then Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and the Sefer Devorim works. That's what makes it work. And it's not that I'm going to turn my life around 180 degrees in 3 minutes, because it never works. It might work for a short time. But do something tiny, something small that I know is achievable, that I'm struggling with, that I can do better. Just focus on the 2 better part of it. I don't know where that came from in all of this, but obviously I needed to say it for myself. Okay. We're told that we're allowed to slaughter an animal for sacrifice, and that's eaten. In this week's Parsha, we're told that we're allowed to slaughter animals and actually eat them. And the mitzvah of slaughtering comes through, how to kill an animal, cutting the windpipe and the food pipe properly, through shechita, that it's done in a perfect way, that the knife is checked perfectly, that there's a brocha said over it, that the blood is removed, because we know the blood of an animal is its soul. It's brought in the Torah. And so the ability to eat meat comes out in this week's Parsha. And then the sanctity of Yerushalayim comes out. Now, Yerushalayim is not mentioned in the Torah here. It's mentioned as a place that Hashem will show you. One day, when you get to Israel, Hashem will tell you where it is. And it was only several hundred years later, 400 years later or thereabouts, more than 400, that King David was able to take Yerushalayim and set it up as the city where Hashem's temple will be built. And only King David's son Solomon was able to build the temple. So it was much later than when we originally went in. But interestingly enough, the Yerushalayim that we have today, the old city of Jerusalem, the walls of that old city are not the walls of King David's old city. There are some parts, obviously are, but the actual walls were built by Sultan Suleiman a few hundred years ago, not that long ago, in the Middle Ages. Where we come, like Jaffa Gate and those gates around Yafo Street where it turns, are not the original sanctified old city. That's further down, because what they call Ir David, where David's palace was, has been excavated at the moment, was discovered only in the last decades, is outside the walls of the current old city. And so we will be shown exactly where the old city is, but I'll come back to that shortly. The Torah then talks about tithing. And I'm just trying to see where it is. It's a little bit later on. I'll talk about it now. It says, I'll talk about it now and I'll come back. It says, aser ta'aser. Wherever it's repeating the same word. Tithe ta'aser, you shall tithe. And we say you shall, it's whenever the Torah repeats the word, so it's the same word, take tithes again, it means you shall, they translated, you shall, here they translate, they shall tithe the entire crop of your planting. But what do you mean? You shall surely tithe. You must definitely make sure to tithe. And this here it's talking about second tithe. So with Maaseh and Truma and Maaseh, we have to take off as a farmer in Israel. This is produce grown in Israel. It doesn't apply out of Israel. But there is a certain amount of produce that we have to take off as a farmer. And if you buy produce in Israel, you need to make sure that it actually, even today, has some, can't do all of the tithing, which I'll come back to and explain some of that. But we have to make sure that at least what we have to take off has been taken off. So if you go to many fruit shops, you'll see they've got a certificate up there saying that they've taken trumas and maasehs and whatever needs to be taken. But if not, or if, we happen to be at friends in Alon Shvut in the Gush, and they've got a number of fruit trees in their backyard, and they had just pulled off a whole lot of plums off their plum trees. I think he took 200 plums. Him and his grandchildren grabbed off all these plums, and he said, we sat down, and it was a way of, as I said before, teach your children, sat down, and they said, right, now we've taken all these plums, we need to set aside some for other people, for Hashem, whatever the case might be. And they did Trumas and Maestras as you're supposed to. It's a very easy process, not dissimilar to taking challah when we bake bread. In fact, it's truma, it's taking truma. It's the same word is used in Torah. So what do we have to take off? So the first thing taken off, now remember, this is the produce of Eretz Israel in Eretz Israel. The question becomes, if you see here that, there's Israeli dates. It could be a potential problem eating those here if they haven't had Trumas and Maasros taken. And a bigger problem, which sometimes happens, is if it's Shemitah produce, because Shemitah produce is not allowed to leave Israel. And so we have to be very careful buying Israeli produce. If it's got a hechsher on it, it's been exported with hechsher, it's obviously been done. But if you're just buying it in a fruit shop, you need to be a little bit careful.
You might persimmons.
Yeah, Jaffa oranges. Okay, so we have a 7-year cycle. The 7th year is Shemitah. So we don't take any tithing. We'll do that a little bit backwards. So there's nothing taken because all Shemitah produce is ownerless. People can come in and take what they like off the trees. The owner of the farm doesn't own that produce for the year. So in the first year, or in every produce that's ever taken, we have to take off what we call Truma. Truma Gedola is given to the Kohen, any Kohen we want, and there's no specified amount for how much is given. Somewhere between a 40th and a 60th, 2, 3%, 1%, 1.5%, a small amount is given to the Kohen. Then we have to take off Maaseh Rishon, first Maaseh, and that's given to the Levi. The Levi has to take, and that's 10% of what's left. The Levi has to take off 10% of that and give that to the Kohen, Trumas Maaseh. So now we've taken off about, let's call it 12%. Okay. Then in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th year of the 7-year cycle, we have to take Maaseh Sheni. I'll come back to Maaseh Sheni in a moment. Which is 10% of what's left. So say we had 88% left, we have to take off 8.8 and give that set that aside for Maaseh Sheni. And then finally, we have to take Maaseh Ani in the 3rd and 6th year and give that to poor people. That same 10%. So in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th years, we take Maaseh Sheni, the second tithe. And that is taken by the person themselves and eaten in Jerusalem. Now, you can't necessarily gather all your produce for the year and then hold it because it's going to go off. So you can redeem that on money, take the money to Jerusalem, buy food in Jerusalem, and eat the food in Jerusalem itself. Meaning that Jerusalem became the central focus of Jewish life. So people would send their children to yeshiva in Yerushalayim, and the spending money they had to buy food was their Maaseh Sheni money. Yerushalayim became the learning center, the everything center of Eretz Israel, somewhat like it is today. Now, we're talking today as the new city of Yerushalayim. This had to be eaten within the walls of Yerushalayim, in the old city as it was. But it puts a focus on Yerushalayim. The sanctity of Yerushalayim is elevated purely because there's Torah being learned there, purely because people are going there. Obviously, everybody went there 3 times a year for the Shalosh Regalim, 3 festivals, but this is talking about just being in Jerusalem. Make sure you go there. Hashem's presence is there in the temple. Hashem's presence is there all the time, and therefore you can grow significantly more in Yerushalayim than anywhere else, because you are so close to the nerve center of the world. Let's call it that. Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. Okay. Talks about safeguarding the words of Hashem, the mitzvahs. Make sure that we watch our mitzvahs, watch what we do. Don't copy what the non-Jews do. We're very good at that. You know, the Hellenists came in, the Greeks came in during the middle of the Second Temple, the whole story of the Hanukkah miracle. The Jews were better Hellenists than the Hellenists themselves.
these.
And we see that here, we see it in America, everywhere we look in the Western world particularly, the Jews are better at it than the locals. We need to be better Jews than we are better locals. I mean, obviously, we need to follow the rules of the law. We need to follow the government in the country we live in. But be careful. That leads into the next section, which just talks about a false prophet. Be careful when somebody comes along and says that he's a prophet, he, she, it is a prophet of God, and here to revoke the Torah and introduced a New Testament, I think they call it.
Yeah.
Be careful. Now, does that refer directly to that? Maybe, maybe not. But, the words of the Torah is,
Watch out.
what do they say? If there will stand up in your midst a prophet or a dreamer of a dream, and he will produce to you a sign or a wonder. He'll walk on water, resurrect the dead. What else? Keep going. And the sign or wonder comes about, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us follow gods of others, and you did not know, and we shall worship them. Do not hearken to the words of that prophet or of that dreamer of a dream. For Hashem your God is testing you to know whether you love Hashem your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Follow Hashem your God and fear him. Be careful of false ideologies. I think in our times in 2024, we can call it wokeism. We can call it any other ism you like over the last century or more. But be careful. Follow Hashem. Don't follow whatever the flavor of the month is in the world. Be careful of one who entices others to go astray. It's the next step in that. Now, what happens if you have a town or a city that goes wayward? Torah talks about that. If one of your cities that Hashem your God gives you, you dwell, and you hear saying lawless men have emerged from your midst, that cause the dwellers of your city to go astray, and they say, let's worship the gods of others, etc., wipe out that city. Don't let this type of festering evil develop amongst you. Why? Banim atem la Hashem Elokeichem lo siskoidedu velo tasimoy karcha ben einechem lames. You are the children of Hashem your God. You are a treasured people. Other people in the world, when somebody dies, they get such grief that it's the end of the world that they slice their bodies and they pull out their hair. Don't do that. It's one of the mitzvahs. We don't do that. We tear a garment. We rip a garment, but we don't rip ourselves. It's not the end of the world because we know life goes on. This life is just a temporal life. Life is much beyond. Our neshama lives on, and we need to know that. And then the Torah talks about food again. Moshe Rabbeinu reminds us, don't eat certain prohibited foods.
And Jews.
Yeah. Everything, the old story about Jews is there was a war, there was a battle, we kept going on and on and on. We won the war, let's eat.
Let's eat.
Yeah, that's the Jewish way of life. But remember that we need to eat the right food, and we need to say the right brachas, and we need to do the right things. So the Torah tells us there's 4 animals that we need to only eat animals that chew the cud and have cloven hooves. There's 4 animals that have one, not the other. Lists them again. And it says only eat from clean animals with these 2 signs. Don't eat creatures in the sea that don't have fins and scales. Just Moshe goes through very quickly repeating all that. You can only eat every clean bird, and it lists, interestingly enough, the Torah doesn't mention, with animals it says has to have chew the cud and cloven hooves. With fish it says it has to have fins and scales. With birds it doesn't mention what type of bird we can eat. It just says these are the types of birds you can't eat. The types of birds we can eat, we know by tradition. So we've got a Masorah that we can eat chicken, we can eat duck, we can eat goose. The interesting one is turkey, because turkey is an American bird. We didn't have the tradition, but there's some signs of turkey that are the same as other birds, and therefore we know we can eat those birds. And we can also eat certain grasshoppers, if you wish. If you are, now that's an interesting one. If you have the Masorah, the tradition that those are the grasshoppers you can eat, and that has been passed down. As Ashkenazim, we've lost that tradition. Some Sfardim still have the tradition of which grasshoppers they can eat, but there are certain signs of grasshoppers that are kosher.
We get rid of
We don't fancy them.
No, because we haven't grown up with it. We don't know what it's like.
An hour away.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then it talks about, as I spoke about before, Ase Tase, that you should tithe your crops. And then it talks about Shemitah, and in Shemitah, what do we have to do? If we've got a loan, we need to remit the loan. Shemitah comes along, not only is Shemitah on the crops, but it's also on loans we've given to other people. We have ways today that we can sign a document which allows us to keep our loans or hand the loans over to the Beis Din. The Torah tells us, I love this little statement by Art Scroll in the corner here, to be warm-hearted and open-handed to our brethren. That's probably, to me, the message of the whole of Sefer Devorim. In fact, it's the whole of life. Because if we can be warm-hearted and open-handed to our brethren, we are then warm to ourselves, we connect to Hashem, and we've lived the way we're supposed to live. The Torah then talks about a Jewish slave and how after 6 years we have to let a Jewish slave go. We have to treat a Jewish slave. A Jewish slave becomes a Jewish slave because they might owe somebody money and they couldn't afford to pay it. So they essentially sell themselves into slavery. So it's one Jewish person having a Jewish slave. But after 6 years, he's got to go free. And when he goes free, you've got to give him gifts. And when he's your slave, if you've only got one pillow, he gets it. He, she. If you're eating steak for dinner, the slave gets steak for dinner. It's what you can't treat them in a negative way. You can't push them down. You need to treat them in an elevated way because they are still Hashem's children. And then the final part of the Parsha is all about, again, the Yomim Tovim, the 3 pilgrim festivals. Talks about Pesach, talks about Shavuos, and talks about Sukkot. And in fact, this laning is the laning that we do in Chutz La'aretz, out of Israel, on 2nd days of Yom Tov. It's the laning of our Shmini Atzeret. It's the laning of 8th day Pesach. It's the laning of 2nd day Shavuos. And the final part of the Torah in the 6th Parsha says 3 times a year, appear before Hashem your God in the place that He will choose. The place that He will choose is Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is a city like no other. And that might be a perfect segue just to discuss very briefly my last 2 weeks in Israel. So 3 weeks ago, now let me take a step back. My son had damaged his knee at a wedding. Dancing at a wedding, as you do, he fell and hurt his knee some 18 months ago, give or take. Had physio, it was all good. Dancing at a wedding, he damaged his knee again.
Was it the same knee?
The same knee,
Same boy.
same boy.
Same boy.
And had physio, and it kept flaring up. You know, if he was exercising too much, whatever he did, he kept feeling it. He could walk fine, no problem. He could run a bit, but eventually his wise mother said, go and get an MRI. So he went to get an MRI, and they said, we need to operate. Your ACL, your meniscus are pretty much shot. So public system in Israel, you'll see a surgeon in December, chance of an operation 5 to 10 months after that. Now, he can live relatively normally with it. Most people who do damage the ACL, unless they're a sportsman or unless it's really bad, you can live with it. You might not be able to run a marathon, but you can certainly, or play a footy game, but you can certainly walk around. I mean, he had 6 months in the army, in Miluim, not a problem. Comes 3 or so weeks ago, about 11:30 at night, on a Thursday night, I'm on the phone for work phone call, and I see on my phone a WhatsApp message from Ori that says, guess what? Booked in for surgery on Monday.
He got a cancellation.
No, it's a better story. We'll get there. So now I'm thinking we've got to go. How is he going to have ACL meniscus surgery and cope when he's in a new apartment? He's moved to a new house a few weeks ago only with 4 housemates, one of whom's a friend of his, the other 3 he didn't even know. They might be nice boys, and they're all very nice boys, we met them, but they're working, they're not going to be able to help him. Who's going to push him to the doctor, the physio, whatever? So I figure we got to go. But not sure if we should go because Iran and Hezbollah are threatening that they're about to rain missiles on Israel. All flights except for El Al are now cancelled. How on earth are we going to get a flight? And should we really be traveling in the 9 days, which was coming up? Rosh Chodesh was on the Monday. Is it appropriate to travel in the 9 days? And Halacha says you don't go on a vacation in the 9 days. It wasn't a vacation, but we don't travel so easily in the 9 days. So comes Friday morning, and I go for a walk to pick up something from the post office. And I was listening to shir. I don't know who the rabbi was that was given the shir, because it was just a shir that I'd started listening to the day before that came up as the next shir on Torah Anytime. And it was a discussion of the Rambam doesn't bring a mitzvah to live in Eretz Israel. Ramban disagrees. Ramban says, yes, there is a mitzvah to live in Israel. That's the gist of the shir. I walk out my house and he says, by the way, I'm right in the middle of the shir. There is a discussion of what you can do in the 9 days, should you or shouldn't you travel. However, somebody asked Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zatzal, a question, should he come to Israel? He was coming to learn Torah in the 9 days, and Reb Shlomo Zalman said, you have to come. Those are the words I heard. Come home, and there are frequent flights available for Sunday. This is Friday at lunchtime, which thankfully I was able to book. And we were able to get on a flight on Sunday night to get to Israel on Monday afternoon. Absolutely.
What did I know? Was it El
Emirates El Al and El Al Jetstar on the way back. All Qantas points. It was just incredible.
And the fact that Jetstar flew you home on time was a miracle
So
too.
everything's a miracle. All of life is a miracle. And so we get to Israel. Now, if you know Israel, Yerushalayim particularly, Machne Yehuda, the shuk, it's got the inside shuk and the outside shuk, as it's colloquially known. The outside shuk being the open street, the inside being the closed-in areas. At Yafo Street, Rehov Yafo, and by the shuk, there are often people sitting there collecting money. We had arrived in Israel, gone to our apartment that we rented, put our bags down, and we arranged to meet Ori at the shuk. We walk there and we come through the outside shuk, and they're sitting where the collectors usually sit with a little cup. And there's usually a collector sitting there with a cup in a wheelchair. Is my 6'4" son sitting in his wheelchair?
was he collecting?
Not collecting, no. He was collecting brochas. That's what he was. It was a most amazing thing, because here's a young man with his leg in bandages in a wheelchair, and everyone you see says Refuah Shleima. And every other person you see, or half of those people say, oh, was it in Gaza? Because there are unfortunately so many injured soldiers around. But he was sitting there. He had a wonderful friend who took him to the operation, stayed with him the whole day, and then brought him to...
And even communicated with me.
Communicated with us and everyone. Yeah, that was
flying,
amazing.
Kept us up to date.
Wonderful.
He, thank God, as of yesterday, is on the exercise bike. His stitches are out. His staples are out. His knee looks beautiful, and he's healing well. Thank God. So, what was it like in Israel?
He's still in a wheelchair.
He's on crutches now.
Crutches.
What's it like in Israel now in the war? We were there 8 months ago. It's different. Because of the threat of Iran, and because so many airlines cut flights, there are 0 tourists in Israel. Now I say 0 tourists in Israel. There are Jewish tourists. There are people from Northern Hemisphere at summer there. We saw a couple, literally, of French tour groups. A dozen people in the one, probably 20 people in another. A few Americans hanging around, but I'll give you a contrast, just in terms of Jerusalem. We went to Machne Yehuda as you do on a Friday morning. I actually meant to print out pictures to show you. Chaos. I've never seen the place so busy. I mean, it's all locals, it's all people from Jerusalem, but it is absolutely packed to the brim, like there was nothing going on. You go to the old city, and you got the Arab market in the old city, the Arab shuk there. And there's 2 ways of walking from Jaffa Gate to the Kotel. Yeah. You go through the Armenian and then through the Jewish quarter, or you can go down through the Arab market. We walked both. The Armenian quarter is closed, essentially. The shops are all closed. There's one shop that was open, which is now a kosher Jewish shop. But the rest of it is completely closed in. Generally, the only people in the Armenian quarter are those priests and monks and whatever that are learning there. Walk through the Jewish quarter, it's buzzing. The Rova is filled with people. It's just incredible how full it is. So you walk that way, the one way. The other times we walked down through the Arab market. I took a photo of going back from just before you get to the Kotel turn off, going back up towards Jaffa Gate. There are 3 or 4 people in the photo. Half the shops are closed. The other shops that are open are begging people to buy stuff because they have no non-Jewish tourists there. None. The shop that I took the photo outside of happens to be a Jewish shop, and happens to be a sofer, a scribe, who sitting in the back writing, I don't know what he was writing, I didn't see it, Sefer Torah, Megillah outside, probably a Megillah, it just kind of looked like that, but I didn't see it properly. But in the front of his shop, he's got signs up that says, Hachnasas Orchim, and he's got free water, cold water, because it was 32 to 34 degrees every day. It was hot in Israel. And he's giving away free water. That's the Jewish way. And there were several other places around the old city that have free water taps as well, with cups and everything else. We went to a minyan. There's a minyan factory just in Jaffa Street, just opposite the shuk. And we went there a few times for mincha. Park Ori's wheelchair outside, he hobbles inside, but outside there's a water station with cups and people just drinking the water, just beautiful. That's the treasured people of the Jewish people. So we were there for Tisha B'Av. Leading up to Tisha B'Av was really hard for me personally. I felt just seeing everybody, there wasn't the feeling that it's the 9 days yet. People were not eating meat and drinking wine, and there was lots of dairy around, but we ate lots of ice cream as well. Jerusalem ice cream is beyond nice. So every day you have to have an ice cream when you're in Israel. That's pure halacha. And no, I'm not talking about an ice cream on a stick. No, I'm talking about the real deal. You go and taste the 5 different flavors and you choose your 2 you want on a cone. There were so many people buying ice creams that it didn't have time to freeze. And so they give it to you, it's already dripping. But, correct, it was just beautiful.
Didn't dry.
No, you just go wash your hands and it's good afterwards. So leading up to Tisha B'Av, for me, I was depressed because I did not feel Tisha B'Av. Here, I'm able to feel it because it's always depressing here. But there, people were just getting about their business. It seemed very normal, and it was like I felt like 2 nights before Tisha B'Av, there were people like playing music, and it just didn't feel right. We came to Tisha B'Av itself, and it was very difficult to get to the Kotel with Ori in a wheelchair. So there was a minyan at Yemin Moshe. Interesting enough, there's lots of suburbs in Israel with the name Moshe on it. That Moshe is Montefiore, Moses Montefiore. He was instrumental in rebuilding Jerusalem in the late 1800s. And so Montefiore Windmill is his, and that whole suburb around there and other suburbs are named after him. So there was a minyan at the windmill, which Ori had been to previously, and so he said, let's go there because it's easier to get to. We were able to get a taxi, dropped us off right where the minyan was. He was able to get up the stairs and we davened there. It was not my cup of tea, but so be it. We were able to at least daven facing the old city and say Eicha, and he then got a cab back home and we walked to the old city. And you walk into the Kotel. So walking from there to the old city, you go down the valley, past the Sultan's Pool, and then up past the tomb of King David into Sha'ar Tzion, into the old city. And we walked to the Kotel. It was absolutely packed.
It was blessed.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of people there, all sitting on the floor or standing and singing. So there's groups of people singing songs. There's other people sitting on the floor, sobbing their eyes out because we know what we're missing. You could palpably feel the mourning. It was the environment just flipped. I sat down, I took out my kinnis, and I said the kinnis by myself, and it was very, very meaningful. we decided to walk back through the old city, and we were planning to go. So the Kotel that we see, the Western Wall that you can see, that the plaza and all that, that's the southwest corner of the Western Wall. The Western Wall itself is about 400 meters. That is, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 meters, whatever it is. That is really an extension of the Temple Mount. So the Western Wall being the outside retaining wall of the Temple Mount. Herod, who was a slave, around the time of the destruction, just before the destruction, just over 2,000 years ago, Herod basically said, the second temple, let me take a step back. Herod was a slave. The Gemara calls him Hurdus. He, for some reason, was able to get out of his slavery. He wasn't a Jewish slave, a non-Jewish slave. Get out of his slavery and able to rise in the ranks and become appointed king of the Jews. Herod was a Jewish king. We have Agrippa's Street, which is just by the Machne Yehuda. Agrippas was a descendant of Herod, grandson of Herod, who was also involved. There's a whole discussion in the Mishnah about him, in the Gemara. His mother was probably Jewish. In fact, I think it's brought down she was Jewish. So he is kind of Jewish, but it says that the king was the only person in the temple that was allowed to sit. Everybody else had to stand. The king was allowed to sit. Agrippas stood when reading, they had to read parts of the book of Devorim in Hakel every 7 years. After Shemitah, during Sukkot, the king would read through bits and pieces of Devarim. All the people would come, men, women, and children. There's this major gathering every 7 years in Israel. Agrippas cried because it says that the king is allowed to sit. He stood and he cried because he felt that he wasn't a worthy king. He realized who he was. Herod decided that the temple was not as glorious as the first temple. The second temple was at a lower level, and he basically remodeled and fixed up the temple. But at the same time he did that, he extended the Temple Mount. So that part of the Temple Mount where the Kotel itself is part of Herod's extension. It doesn't have the same sanctity as the Temple Mount where the Golden Dome sits today. Under the Golden Dome is a rock. It's known as the Dome of the Rock. That rock, according to our tradition, is what we call Even Shasiyah, the foundation stone of the world. It's the rock where the binding of Isaac took place, the Kedes Yitzchak, where Avraham was there. It's the rock where Yaakov slept at night and had his dream. It's the rock where in the first temple the ark stood. That was the Holy of Holies in the temple. It's the most sacred part of the world. It's where Hashem, so to speak, kisses the earth. So what they've uncovered in the last decade or so is a part of the Kotel right opposite that, right by that rock. It's called the Kotel HaKatan, the small Kotel. And we try to get there that night. To me, that is it's the closest place we can go to get to where Hashem's presence kisses the world. Hashem says when the temple's destroyed, the prophecy said he's going to remove his presence from there, but retain his presence in the Kotel, in the Western Wall. That's why the Western Wall's never been destroyed, and that's why it is so moving and meaningful. If you connect to Hashem, that's the place to connect to Hashem. That's where Hashem's presence is, which is an interesting thing. A lot of people put notes in the wall. A lot of the rabbis say you shouldn't put your fingers into that because it's got holiness, it's got sanctity. So the Kotel HaKatan, we could not get there. It was so chaotic. There were more Jewish people in the old city of Jerusalem on Tisha B'Av night and day than any other time in the year. There was virtually nobody else there. There was police and more police and lots of people davening.
And no security, form of security.
Police.
But no security checking and nothing happened.
There's security checking when you go into the Kotel.
There was.
Yeah, absolutely. When you go in the Kotel, there always is. But there were a few locals, Arabs that live in that area, but nobody else. And we walked all the way out, and we came out through Shar Shechem, Damascus Gate. It was just an incredible experience. We went back late afternoon. We caught a taxi. Our place to the old city is about 2.5 kilometers, 70 shekel taxi ride, because it took so long to get there, because the roads were closed. There were so many people there. The change in atmosphere from the night before of people mourning and feeling that destruction to the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, a feeling of hope. And that's the contrast. And so there's a group of NCSY year 10, essentially, American kids who come there every year, and they were there. They sit at the back of the plaza, like just behind where the wall is. So you've got the kotel, then you've got the mechitza that goes into the big plaza at the back. They sit in the front of that big plaza. And in a big group, I don't know how many there actually were, probably 50 or 60, with their madrichim, leading them in song. With them was actually the mayor of Jerusalem, sitting there next to the leader, and some other representative of the hostages was sitting there, and they were just singing one song after another. And hundreds, if not thousands of people were standing and sitting around the circle, and the circle just grew and grew and grew. We were sitting there probably for better part of 2.5, maybe 3 hours at the end of Tisha B'Av. I did not know that I was fasting. I had no idea. It's 30 degrees. We're sitting out in the sun. I mean, the sun was already going down at that point, but it was still hot. There was a beautiful breeze. But you could feel this sense of hope, of pride, of what we've got, but knowing that we're still missing something. I think that's where there's this contrast that a lot of people feel that, oh, we've got it all. We don't.
No.
Clearly, because of the war, we are still in exile, even in Israel, maybe even more so in Israel. On the surface, the people of Israel are getting on about their business as if nothing is happening. But you scratch a little bit below. The way I put it on Shabbos, the way I put it on Shabbos was, I think everybody in Israel is suffering from PTSD.
No.
PTSD. I think every single person is. Some significantly more than others. In other words, you ask one question and it comes out. Others are suppressing it. They're not on the surface. They're clearly not. But everybody is suffering. This war is dragging on. Tourism in Israel is shot. And even if Iran, please God, they don't fire a single missile, but even if they don't, what they've been able to do is bring the Israeli economy down to its knees because tourism is no longer happening for now. But we saw yesterday the most incredible miracles in that Israel were able to take out 1,000 missile launches, preemptive strike, 6,000 missiles they believe they took out. So Hezbollah is now boasting that they've achieved this most successful attack on Israel, firing 320 missiles. They were planning on firing 6,320 or thereabouts.
And Iran is saying they're chickens.
Yeah.
Did you see? They even had a cartoon
A
about
cartoon
it.
that they chicken,
That
that they
chicken.
didn't do, they didn't do what they're supposed to do.
Can we hold the questions if you don't mind? So I want to finish and we can come back to questions afterwards. I think we need to look at Israel as the place that Hashem has blessed. The place where Hashem's presence is in some form, not the way it will be, please God, when Mashiach comes. Because the people of Israel are resilient. The people of Israel, they're tired. They're tired of war. But they are getting ahead with their lives. And just seeing scenes like a train or a light rail in Jerusalem that we could not get onto because it was so full. Or having Shabbos dinner with people, a group of people that we'd never met before. We knew 2 of the people. We brought 5 of us there. And there were 14 of us at dinner. And experiencing Shabbos in Jerusalem, we need to look forward to Shabbos where Hashem's presence is there, fully, completely. Mashiach comes speedily.
Oh,